Let's try to continue. Lesson 2. At the end of the lesson, you are expected to examine the condition of life in the 19th century Philippines. Monarchy. It is a government system where a family of a king or a queen governs everything, where all power is concentrated to a single person, that's everyone in his or is her subject, and proclaimed rules and appointments must be followed. The succession will be the son or daughter or the closest next kin. You cannot change those practices that they have. Only the son, only the daughter, only the closest next kin. The first, second, third, and so on, consanguinity of the family. The mestizos, it is a hybrid notion of a person whose blood is coming from two different regions, like Chinese mestizo, Spanish mestizo, half Chinese, half Filipino, or half Spaniard. And that's why if you have such a blood like this, so do not be afraid of showing your faces to the people, of showing your identity, that who really you are, because that is part of our blood that runs to our veins. Industrialization, the establishments and development of mechanized manufacturing that begins the industrial and technology revolution. In use, it referred name of the Spaniards to Filipino natives that has a negative meaning and perception. That's why it's not an easy one. It's not good during the time of the Rizal if you're gonna hear the word Indios or Indio, because that is a negative, because it has a negative meaning and perception towards the mind setting of the Spaniard people who used to call it one to our citizenry. To perform the aforesaid unit learning outcomes 1, for the second week of this course, you need to fully understand the following essential knowledge that will be presented in the next slides of this module. Please note that you are not limited with the module given, or the slides given, or the textbook presented, or the self-instructional manual. You are expected to utilize other books, research articles, online sources, and other resources available in the university's library, such as e-library, search.request.com, etc. Socio-political and economic conditions in the Spanish era. During the Spanish era, the political, economical, and sociological conditions are far different on what is present. During those times, the prominent political figures who hold important offices of the state were the Spaniards. The one who holds the economic growth and prosperity of a society or person was in the hands of the few. It is important to understand the different and use it as a lens to closely comprehend the situation of our ancestors during the Spanish regime, of which we are enslaved for more than 300 years. The socio-political system is one of the biggest questions asked. Is what was the political system that is followed during the Spanish era? It is a curious question that entails scrutiny in the matter of comprehending the possible abuses and challenges of our beloved country during those times. It is not new to us that most of the Filipinos, Indios, at that time was known to be at the lowest level of the hierarchy, considered as nothing on his her own country. Spain reigned over the Philippines for 330 years, from 1565 to 1898. Since Spain was far country, the King of Spain sent representatives to govern. Before the existence of the Governor-Generals, the Philippines was under the Viceroy of Mexico, who reported directly to the King of Spain. But after the liberation of Mexico around 1821, the Governor-General reported directly to the King of Spain. Hence, Spain established a centralized colonial government, of which was divided into the national and local governments led by Governor-General. During the Spanish era, the political, economical, and sociological condition far differed on what is present during those times. The prominent political figures who held important offices of the state were the Spaniards, the one who holds the economic growth and prosperity of a society or person was in the hands of the few. The Spanish regime of which are enslaved for more than 300 years. The national government maintained the peace and order of the colony, collect taxes, and do developmental projects for the colony like building schools and other public works. On the other hand, the local government unit of Spain was divided into two, the alcalde or alcaldia mayor and corregimiento or corregidor, the one that governed a province that was not fully been controlled by Spain. The political system. In order for us to understand fully, we must learn also what are those particular functions, obligations, and duties and responsibilities of each public officials during the time of Jose Rizal. Gobernador General, they are given the highest rank. King's representative, implements royal decrees, had the power to dismiss and appoint public officials, collect taxes, exercise legislative power. Requirement must be a peninsularis, a person should be born in Spain. See, the Filipino has no chances to become a Gobernador General during that time. Only a person born in Spain. Residencia, it is a judicial court that investigates and checks the performance of the Gobernador General. Corregimiento, corregidor governs the province that was not fully been subjugated. Enjoy the privilege of galleon trade. You know what's galleon trade, right? Vista, a visitor coming from Spain and report its findings to the King of Spain. Gobernador General, as what I mentioned a while ago, they're given a higher ranks. King's representatives implements royal decrees, had the power to dismiss and appoint public officials, collect taxes, exercise legislative power. Requirements must be a peninsularis or born in Spain. Royal Audiencia served as an advisor to the Gobernador General, had the power to check and report abuses, audit the expenditures of the colony, sent annual report to Spain, highest court of the colony. Alcaldia or alcalde mayor governed the provinces that was fully been subjugated. And if you're living in Davao City, this is what we call now city mayor. Manage the day-to-day operations of the provinces or the provinces, implemented laws from the national and supervised collection of taxes, enjoyed the privileges or privilege of galleon trade. Gobernadorcillo, little governors, they are the one who govern the towns and the provinces, of which is aided by lieutenants, chief lieutenant, police lieutenant, field lieutenant, and livestock lieutenant, exempted from taxes. A native or mestizo at least 25 years old and literate. That's the qualification for you to become a gobernadorcillo during the time of Jose Rizal. Cabeza de barangay or barangay captain, which majority of us are aware already of this terminology. The barangay captain responsible for peace and order of the barrio and recruit men for public works. Should be literate in Spanish during the time of Rizal. But in our time now, they can run for as long as they knew how to read and to write. No qualifications, higher qualifications, so to say. Ayuntamiento, large towns who became cities, had a city council called Cabildo, Alcalde Mayor, Regidores, or the councilors, Alguacil Mayor, police chief, Escribado, scribe. So, the mayor, the councilors, the chief officer of the mayor, and sometimes the one who want to be the spokesperson, the one who write and the one to tell us what really happenings inside the offices through the statement of the mayor. So they're the one getting down notes. Abuses and challenges during the time of Rizal. In the 19th century was an era of growth and innovation. The idea of industrialization became most popular during this period. The essence of democracy and nationalism inspired numerous revolutionaries to promote changes in the fields of science, technology, economics, and politics. The Philippines in the 19th century remained primitive despite the emerging marks of growth. The government occupied by the self-indulgent people remained deaf and blind to the people's cry of injustice and suffering. The social and economic systems of the country remained reliant on the feudalistic patterns, which fueled racial discrimination and division based on the status quo. They imported to the Philippines the idea of liberalism from the West and promoted innovation in how the Filipino viewed the country as a whole. The product of Spanish colonization, which upheld the landholding system brought by the arrival of the conquistador, made the Philippines feudalistic in setup. Dominion toward the land owned was practiced wherein the authority and power resided in the hands of the wealthy few or the wealthy few. Hence, there was a huge gap between the landlords and their tenants. Spanish occupation shaped the social structure of the Philippines. It made the Philippines embrace the master-slave relationship, allowing the elites to hold the Indians captive. People who run the country lacked qualifications, skills, and leadership traits. The government at the administrative level was occupied by appointed people who held office following their selfish motives. The results of such actions were injustice, like coordination or lack of coordination among officials, and increased financial abuses. After spending much time and money to obtain their royal appointment, many officials exploited their office and its wide powers to recover their expenses and enrich themselves. Officials who sought to advance their interests did so by collecting higher taxes than the usual high price, indulto para comercial. The alcalde, who was also the provincial judge, controlled a court loaded with biases in favor of the mischievous deeds of the Spaniards. This led to the closure of numerous businesses owned by some natives, increasing the number of the poor in the country. So if you're going to ask why is it a lot of poor living in our country right now, even before, there are already people who live in a very poor situation. Natives were limited in their participation in the government. Their responsibilities were not compensated adequately, and this often led to the poor performance of their jobs. Collected money from the other natives was not used to improve a certain province they ran, but it was gained for the self-betterment of the officials. The existence of dishonesty, Gobernador Silio made the position attractive to some men. The existence of dishonest Gobernador Silio made the position attractive to some men. Oh, it's not good. They are dishonest but still they are attractive. That's why we cannot deny the fact. The more you tell lies, the more you are convincing to the other ears. But it's not good. That's not a good practices perhaps. Injustices prevailed as homes of the natives were searched without warrants. People were convicted and exiled for being filibusters. Books, magazines, and any other written materials could not be published and introduced into the country without the prior approval of the Board of Censors. Organized assemblies and any other political meetings initiated by Indians are prohibited. The poor were often declared guilty without the due process of law. Merits of cases were simply based on money, race, and links with no influential people. One of the concrete examples, Doña Chidora's life in prison. He was given an injustices. He was given mistreatment. She was accused. She was not given a good justice, but was proven of her innocence at the later part. If you are poor before, you don't have justice. And even right now, we can feel discrimination. If you are poor, the judgments are easily to be given. But if you are rich, always the justice are delayed. But not at all. Churches could interact and take part in the proceedings of the state. They were influential, manipulating the Indians to abide by the state's laws as it pleased to God. Christianity was a tool of colonizing countries. I cannot understand the attitude of the priests before. Some of the priors I cannot understand. And even some of the priests right now. I'm so sorry for those Catholic, very faithful Catholic believers. I've encountered also a rudeness attitude of some of those priests. In fairness to those who are doing in good, they are lampooning the good names of those priests, of those church leaders who are doing their job faithfully and honestly, with full of love and respect to others. The educational system before, it says that the Philippine educational system during those times was pitiable and limited to the wealthy few. Kung may pera ka, if you have money, then you're allowed to do so. You're allowed to enroll. You're allowed to study further. Intellectual growth can be seen in the middle class and was always censored by the priors for fear that the knowledge would expose the injustices that had been going in the country or going on in the country. Government intervention in school is non-existent. Hence, schools could freely add or omit topics in their curricula. Knowledge was measured in terms of the ability of the students to memorize, largely hampering intellectual progress. Keeping the Filipinos under the Spanish control demanded intellectual isolation and extreme dogmatic manipulation by the priors. Hence, selected parts of the Philippines had the required schools for education like Manila, Cebu, Haro, Nueva Cáceres, Nueva Segovia. Also, censorship of books and teaching materials that might defy the church and the Spanish government. Can you imagine? The priors are trying to control, are trying to manipulate, are trying to rule even in their educational system. During the 19th century, challenges, the spread of industrialization marked the fame of democracy, liberalism, and nationalism. These ideologies were promoted as the industries in the world in the 19th century developed. Mankind's advancement in the field of science, technology, physics, and chemistry resulted in the creation of a community embracing a life of ease caused by technology. The massive usage of new types of machinery was the trademark of the industrialization. It is the beginning of a new era that evolves in the revolution of technology and science. Pope Leo XIII opposed the unification of liberals in Italy. Meanwhile, in Spain, the liberals considered the church an enemy of the reforms. Anti-clericalism became a hot topic in the 19th century because if the increase in people's materialistic views brought about by economic prosperity and the desire for freedom, Rerum Novarum called for just treatment within the labor sector but condemned Marxism and promoted social justice, which was in line with the church's traits. Displacements of cultural roots and Dr. Rizal's nationalism. Cultural displacement is one of the consequences if a nation was conquered. The displacements of our ancestry beget one thing: a gradual loss of our authentic identity. This effect caused us to be influenced by the conqueror's ideology, practices, and traditions, consequently mixing up or forgetting our own identity. This colonial effect was known to be cultural hybridity. Hence, it is important to study our nationalistic heart. Nationalism is defined as the loyalty and devotion towards its own nation. Furthermore, it was defined as a sense of national consciousness, putting the nation as the priority than other things, emphasizing on promoting the nation's culture and influence. Jose Rizal promoted nationalism in his existence in the world. He believed that the lack of national sentiments brings forth the destruction of the nation. It was the evil that gradually destroys one's identity and freedom. As he said, that a man in the Philippines is only an individual. He was not a member of a nation. He was forbidden and denied of the right of association and is therefore weak indolence of the Filipino. Jose Rizal was viewed as a gallant example of a person who loves his country. He studied and followed as a reflection on how to be nationalistic. He was perceived to have these factors as a nationalistic person. First, he gave emphasis on the importance of Tagalog language. He preserved some of our cultural traits and practices. He was open to criticize the priors. He defended Filipino rights and used his pen to convey the love of his country. Indigenous displacements in showing one's nationality respect with our ancestral tribe is necessary. Our ancestry and tribes held our cultural traits and practices that identify us unique with the other nations. With this, it is important to note an alarming situation that is happening until the present that began rampantly during the Spanish period, and that is indigenous displacement. It is where our ancestors are displaced with their own land in the mountains and disrupted their simple and peaceful way of living. It's so sad to hear that thing. An alarming situation that needs attention. This displacement of cultural roots is in many forms, but the consequence is always the same. The result will always be the gradual loss of our cultural roots, and hopefully not destruction of our authentic Filipino identity.